Okay. A warm welcome to those attending and to our viewers watching live on the Council's YouTube channel, Hillingdon, London. This is a meeting of the Corporate Resources and Infrastructure Select Committee. My name is Councillor John Riley and I'm the chairman of this meeting. Details of the business to be considered today are shown on the agenda, copies of which are available in the room and also online under the live broadcast. For those present in the room and intending to speak, please note that you will be filmed and any statements you make will be recorded and made public. A reminder to councillors, officers and those speaking today that you should turn your microphone button on when speaking, and this will ensure you can be heard in the room and by those watching online. A little bit of housekeeping: we're not expecting the fire alarm to go off, so if it does, please follow officers to the fire exits and out of the building to the designated meeting points. Mobiles and tablet devices. For those in the room, please switch any mobile devices to silent before the meeting starts. Please note that councillors on the committee may use their laptops or tablets during the meeting to view the agenda and paperwork. So we'll introduce ourselves. So if we start with Councillor Bennett and work our way around the table.
Councillor Kaushik Banerjee.
Councillor Farhad Chubadar.
Emma Gilbertson, Head of Corporate Communications.
Pudam Pathak, Head of Highways.
Councillor Ella Garalik.
Councillor Narinda Gok.
Councillor Stuart Mazers.
Anisha Teji, Democratic Services.
And these buttons do need a lot of pressing. All right, so we can go on to the agenda for today's meeting, and we will start with apologies for absence, please.
No apologies, Chair.
Thank you. Full house. Well done, everybody. Declarations of interest in matters coming before the meeting, all the usual ones, so unless anyone's got anything special to add, no, thank you. Minutes of the previous meeting, which, if memory serves correct, was the first meeting of this newly constituted committee. So we had the introduction to this new committee with our additional responsibilities. As I think I might have observed last time, we now have 18 heads of responsibility and 4 cabinet members, including the leader of the council, so cabinet member for corporate services, cabinet member for finance, cabinet member for property, highways and transport, which was absorbed into this committee, a bit like the Borg, from the previous select committee. So does anyone have any comments or additions to the minutes of the last meeting? No? They agreed? Thank you. Good. All right, we can go on to item 4. All those matters in part 1 will be in public, though I don't think there are any part 2 items, but if there were, they'd be in private, so I don't need to worry about that. Item 5, a subject close to my heart. When I was in Cabinet, I tried to start this whole business with electric vehicles, just when I was nodding. And it was quite a challenge. But we went around the country and looked at other boroughs and saw what they were doing, which was quite interesting. And a lot of different areas have gone for many different options. Some have gone for on-street, some have gone for off-street, some have gone for repurposing a lot of their car parks as charging stations, and some have gone in with different companies. So it's quite interesting to see how far this has gone. So agenda item 5, electric vehicle infrastructure review, 12-month update. And Poonam, it's all over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we provided the report last year on EV infrastructure, how the council is going to take the infrastructure forward. That included the delivery model and the strategy. Based on the strategy, is that right? You can hear? Okay. Yeah. Based on the strategy, we had 3 goal, short-term plan, medium and long-term. So we are more or less now complete in short-term program, which is to upgrade the existing infrastructure. We also added more infrastructure on those areas. So out of 46 which we planned from phase 1, we have managed to do, I think I gave you in the report 24, but we have done 34 altogether now. So we have 10 more to do. They will be completed in next 2 weeks. So we will be completing phase 1 within next 2 weeks. Looking at the uptake, we are seeing quite a lot of uptake as well, especially Green Lane car park is quite high uptake, then followed by Pump Lane, which is in Hayes. So they are seeing quite a lot of usage on those car parks. On phase 1, we had another option of ultra rapid. We wanted to do very fast type of EV. Currently, our contractor, EPCOA, they are working with the electrical suppliers because it takes quite a lot of energy. They are doing the feasibility study of those sites. We have 3 sites selected. For that, we will be doing 14 ultra rapid, which will be like 15-20 minute charging duration. So that will really help the resident. So that's on the existing plan. Just to give you the future program, which is the medium term, this year we also bidded to OJEF, which is for on-street, Office for Zero Emission Vehicle. So there was the pot of money for on-street residential charging point scheme. They call it OX funding. We managed to get 100K approximately. With the match funding from our supplier, we will be seeing 36 more sockets to come in. We are planning to do 22 kilowatt, which is higher than what we have currently. The contractor is communicating again with the supplier, UKPN and SSC, for the electrical supply point of view. They are a bit slow at the moment to get back to us, so we have only managed to get 3 site update. We are still waiting for 5 site. Altogether, we had 8 site for phase 2. That's on the phase 2. We have furthermore update on the bid. Again, OJAV has a new pot of money for Levi funding. They call it local electrical infrastructure funding. It's quite a big pot of money from OJAV. And it's not a single bid. We have to do the joint bid with other council. So in our bid, we are 6 boroughs, which is neighbouring boroughs. And altogether, we might be seeing 1.2 million coming our way. Their intention is to have a match funding from the supplier. So we submitted the stage 2 bid on Friday as their timeline. From now onward, we'll be looking at the procurement, and hopefully we will hear from OJAP by November time for further process, because their intention is to release the money by July, March 2025. So that's what their plan is. And if we get that sort of money and match funding from the supplier, we might see another 500 odd EVs. Basically, they want an on-street type of smaller type of EV units rather than the higher side of EV units. So we might be seeing quite substantial increase in EV in the borough.
All right. Well, I mean, in a sense, a little bit of background, because it was perfectly clear when we looked into this a few years ago that some areas were a lot further than we were, but at the same time, a lot of geographical areas, boroughs and counties and so forth, had sort of gone off at quite a pace, but discovered that, in fact, that events had overtaken them in a sense. And some of you around this table are too young, but years ago there was a sort of competition between Betamax and VHS in terms of what used to be called video recorders. And the principle was in terms of technology, what was first to the market wasn't necessarily going to be the thing that lasted the longest. And we were very conscious of not going down a road that meant you spent a huge amount of money on emerging technology, which might, in a very few years, be overtaken by something else. And to that extent, we were quite cautious in terms of how we were able to proceed. We know that some other boroughs and counties went absolutely heck for leather by putting in lots of small posts on streets, and there were a lot of problems with those. We knew about that, and they only discovered the problems after they were used and so forth. Then there were the bigger charging stations which needed to be replaced after a short period of time. So, and indeed the entire technology, I mean, there's mention in this report about other types of technology which may ultimately prove to be much more efficient and cost effective than what we're doing at the moment. But I think the answer is that a lot of people who've bought vehicles, and I've seen different figures to suggest that the uptake of electric vehicles is not as rapid as it was, but is still a steady flow, because there's still quite a lot of concern by consumers about the capacity to be able to charge. A lot of people will have got home charging units, which is obviously, in one sense, the best way to do it, but an awful lot of properties don't have that capacity, things like flats and so forth. So it's good that we are going after this. So there's a table of where some of these new units are. I mean, we were quite early on, because there were some very early charging units that were put in, which obviously are pretty obsolete now, but we did trial some. But we've got at Appendix 1 on page 8, there's a list there of the car parks to a large extent, and across the borough, pretty much everywhere really, where the charging units are going in. And that was one of the things that we discovered when we went out to various places. And in Oxfordshire, they've certainly got a lot of charging units in their car parks. And some of their car parks are conveniently positioned near areas of high housing density. So people charge their vehicles in the car park, and there's all sorts of different arrangements about whether you, as it were, park your car to charge or whatever. So, all right. So, so how's the coverage going in terms of numbers of units, and are we looking to expand to all of our car parks essentially, do you think?
Not all at this stage. We are doing the mapping where people can have 5-minute walking distance for the charging. So that's the model we are currently doing for Levi as well, where people who doesn't have off-street parking can benefit more than people with off-street parking, because they can charge at home and it's cheaper for them to charge at home. So that's what we are trying to focus, wherever the car parks where we can justify to OZEV the people, the resident will benefit, we will be focusing on those car parks.
All right, and what about on-street charging, where people can't have home units, but nevertheless obviously park their cars outside their houses or close to it? Are we going down that route?
That's something definitely we are looking at, because Oak funding and Levi funding, they push for on-street parking charging more than car park areas or higher EV output type of units. So out of this phase 2, we have 4 locations on street. We want to trial it and see how people use it. Then we'll roll out more in Levi on street. So we have 4 locations selected for phase 2.
Councillor John.
Sorry. So I've got a couple of questions. One is, I've looked at some of these points, and if I go to somewhere like Tesco, Sainsbury's, even Tesla itself, the value for money is far better than what, as a council, we're offering. Have we looked at claiming tax back or trying to be more competitive? That was the first question. And the second question is around security of, I mean, I've seen in some places where these charge points have been vandalised, etc. Have we got anything in place for that?
Your first question about the benchmarking of the charging the resident. Before we put the charging, we looked at the energy cost, what council has to pay, plus the maintenance and everything else we need to add on. And we also did the benchmarking with other suppliers, how much others are charging. So our cost was quite competitive. We have applied 60p for Hillingdon resident with Hillingdon First card and 65p for non-resident. There are lots of other areas where people charge like 70 plus, but I don't know what others, because obviously with the businesses like Tesco and all, they have the business need of selling their goods as well. So I don't know whether they are giving subsidized rate, because some of these Asda and Lidl, I think they had a free charging at the beginning, so they stopped that free charging because of the energy costs gone really high. So because we have to we are not making any money, but we are providing the service. So the cost what we have given is based on what others were charging at the time. So the second part of question in terms of security, we had one vandalism so far. It was, I don't know, somebody thought the money, they can take the money out, but there is no money. It's just an online payment anyway. But we are monitoring that. There is nothing at the moment, but we will be reviewing that in future.
I suppose it might be an idea to put something in Hillingdon People about the fact that I doubt that any of the charging units are going to be taking cash, that's for certain. I mean, I can imagine all of them will be either credit card payments or online payments. So just something that says, or maybe just something on the machine that says that, you know, no money is actually collected by the machines. I think it might be quite difficult, depending on the hardware, as it were. If they make units that are sort of vandal-proof, that's one thing. I mean, the whole point about this, and when we first started looking into it, a lot of local authorities quite rightly said, look, we didn't provide petrol stations. So why, you know, on what basis are we providing electric vehicle charging? But the problem was that they weren't the companies at the time. There was like 2 companies or something that were providing this. But anyway, there we go. Councillor Chadaba.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your report. I see all these figures in Appendix 1, and I'm wondering, how many of these have been installed?
34 so far.
34?
Yeah, 36, I think, 10 to be done.
Mm-hmm. So do we know which sites are completed?
Yes. Only 2 sites, they are not complete, which is Civic Centre, 6 units to be done, which will be done in 2 weeks' time. And Pembroke Garden car park to be done. We have 6 there as well. I think 12, yeah, you're right. 12 to be done altogether.
Okay, so, and the rest of them?
They are all complete and they are working.
So are the ones in Phase 1C completed?
No, as I said previously, Phase 1C require quite a lot of energy. So our supplier, they are communicating with the supplier, UKP and NSSE, for the power supply.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Bennett, then Councillor Banerjee, then Councillor Mathers.
Imagine the disappointment of people at home if they couldn't hear what I was saying. No, it was really a really good balanced approach, I thought, in terms of all of the fascinating things that come under Annex A, that you just don't know what's going to happen, from rapid charging hubs to changes in batteries to hydrogen vehicles, etc., that you can end up wedding yourself to something that you've invested a huge amount of money in. and then every BP garage becomes a charging station, or hydrogen vehicles take over. So I think it feels like the right balanced approach for where we are, particularly outer London, where uptake of electric vehicles has been lesser, and the technology still isn't there for people who want to drive larger vehicles like vans, or they need to do an awful lot of mileage, etc. The one that really fascinated me, I'm still getting my head around wireless charging for the phone, was this induction in-road charging, that soon you just park your car over a hotspot and it charges, or you drive along the road and it charges for you. Just, I feel like I'm getting old. But thank you, Chair. That was all I was trying to say.
I really do think that's the problem. That there's two big problems, really. One, letting all local authorities choose their own path is madness, really, because everybody goes in a different direction. We need a national programme. But and secondly, the direction of travel, no pun intended, in terms of the technology, we just don't know where it's going to go next. So you do end up having, because there is a degree of demand, a significant degree of demand. Are we going to get a Betamax moment where there's a left turn and suddenly something else is there? That everybody spent tens of thousands or millions, I suppose, of pounds going down one sort of direction. I mean, originally there was a fear that you'd have to have a different charger, for each vehicle, for each company that produced vehicles. So luckily that hasn't happened. All right, Councillor Banerjee.
Thank you, Chairman. I just want to echo what my fellow councillors said in terms of, thanks for providing such an insightful report. I found it very interesting. My questions also allude to Appendix 1 on page 8. Are you able to give me some sort of understanding in terms of the useful economic life of these, I guess, the first batch of EV units? Because I'm concerned, is not the right word, how quickly the technology is moving. These are expensive investments, and I still think of EV technology as quite new, and here I'm seeing we're already replacing 22 existing units. So is that like 4 years, 5 years? Just some sort of understanding on that would be good. And if I may, the second part, do we have usage stats at these sites? And is demand outstripping supply, and we can't keep up, with demand, and we can't build these units fast enough? That'd be interesting to understand as well. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Yes, you're right in terms of how quickly this technology is changing. But the units, what we have is we can do the software upgrades on those units. So you can do further update on the same infrastructure. You might not need to change the hardware, but you can change the softwares. So that will upgrade the existing or the new technology, whatever it might come up. So that's the intention, to upgrade rather than sort of getting rid of the metal post or whatever it might be. So you can have the up-to-date software to communicate and do the supply. In terms of the unit to be upgraded to the higher type of units, when we were rolling out phase 1, we wanted to do something really quick because our infrastructure were failing. They were not working. So rather than going with a big circle of UKPN and SSC communication, we tried to utilize the power we had at the time. So that's the reason we have only 7 kilowatt units on the car park, because that's the supply available. But if the demand increases, then this is why we, in phase 1C, we are trying to increase some of these very high type of EV units. And when we have this 22 kilowatt in phase 2 from the OX funding, we are trying to do 22 kilowatt. So we are trying to see the demand and increase the capacity as we go along. Because dealing with UKPN and SSC is not that easy, because especially SSC doesn't have that much of capacity in south of the borough, although we might be okay north of the borough with UKPN. It's a bit of a fight with the electricity, who gets that electricity from supply from these suppliers.
All right, thank you. Councillor Mathers.
Thank you, Chair. If I may, just very quickly on the last question, just if I may, for your Councillor, is it a little bit of a missed opportunity if we... Look, they needed renewing, they needed to be put in place, but we've gone for the lower spec. And I've often found that if people have a competitor down the road who are on 22 watt, for example, why would they come to a council car park for 7 even though it's been active? And are we going to get caught in this chicken and egg sort of situation where we need to be at the top end to attract people? Until we attract people, we don't want to invest in the high without high usage into higher functioning technologies. I just worry there's a bit of a trap there, and I just wonder what kind of balance. And I know that the grid and the capacity is something far beyond the reach of any of us here, and we knew that was going to be a problem, particularly on the M4 corridor where there's already huge demand for IT infrastructure, other infrastructure to do with airport related capacity. How do we break the cycle of when it comes to the next round of upgrades needed, that we don't just settle for what is the limit of the infrastructure provider around us? I may just be asking a very philosophical rather than helpphul question, but do you kind of get what I'm driving at?
Definitely, because that makes sense. This is a bit of a problem for us as well to roll out, because the phase 1 was the quick fix. We wanted to have something for the resident, because the resident will keep coming to us by saying they can't use it. They were going to maybe the areas what we had previously, like it was swimming pool or that sort of area, so people just park it there and charge and go and do whatever they needed to do. So it was easy for us to utilize the existing power and upgrade it. So phase 1 was quick win. We are doing phase 2 using 22 kilowatt. Definitely that will help. But the problem we have is OZEV doesn't want the boroughs to do a higher type of EV units, because they want to leave that for the supplier themselves, because there is a business type of model, because they cost quite a lot of money. One would cost quite a lot because you have a grid capacity to analyze, and supply would cost thousands of pounds. So they want the supplier to get that sort of in business model rather than the council doing that business model. For the council, they want us to do the smaller type. So this is why the Oaks funding was on-street parking, and they want the similar in the Levi funding as well. But the council, we don't want to sort of leave that sort of pot of money where we could benefit out of that as well. So our EV is not going to be the higher spec. Our will be to help the resident wherever people can't park off street, and they can have that facility on street, as well as wherever we can. We will try to do in the car park as well. At least 22 kilowatt, that's what we're thinking of.
All right, thank you. Councillor Gaelic, and welcome to the committee. I think it's the first time you've been able to come along, so that's great. Hello.
Thank you, Chair. My question is about mapping. You mentioned that. Is it the street mapping for on-street charging infrastructure? And if so, is it already in progress? And who is doing it? Is it in-house, or you're using consultants or suppliers?
We have lots of data. London Council, they have quite a lot of data. There are lots of organisations helping the government. They have lots of data. The way they have modelled is where is the patches of on-street parking issues, and where people need. There is a demand curves as well being produced. We have a list of where people request us to install on-street parking, so we are keeping the list that as well. So we are mapping all this sort of information, and if the car park is there, then what is the distance from the car park to the resident where they can have that sort of. So it's lots of things going on. We are doing in-house at the moment with the London Council data. So they have mapped the data with. There is an organisation which is OJEF support body, which is called EST, Energy Saving Trust. So they have got quite a lot of data as well with them.
Councillor Banerjee.
Thank you, Chairman. And please keep me honest here, Chairman, because my question may be just going slightly around the edges of this particular paper, and committee, but in a previous select committee that I've been on, we've been discussing council electric vehicles, and is the infrastructure for council electric vehicles in this scope as well? Because why would they not use our infrastructure to charge the vehicles, maybe at cost rather than somewhere more expensive? So I hope that question is okay, Chairman. And
Yeah. Sorry, can you repeat?
yeah, so we've got a council fleet of electric vehicles, and we're slowly moving to more and more. Are they using this infrastructure, or do we have points and infrastructure for our own vehicles that's separate to this? Because why would we try and make money off our own recharging, if that makes sense?
Yeah, thank you. We have we have been planning for Hillingdon Road Depot for the fleet. We got a plan in progress. The costing been done as well. So we want to give certain number. I don't know. The first phase, I think they are thinking of 30 odd vehicle come in next year or this year. So we are trying to make the provision for those for now. Because we looked at the grid check and we have enough capacity in the substation next to our Hillingdon Road Depot, so we want to make that usage of that energy. If that increases, the fleet increases, then we might need to think of alternative, whether we need to have another substation to feed those vehicles. So currently we are fine with the number of vehicles coming in next couple of years. Moving forward, definitely council need to think about how we want to have that facility for the new fleet that might come up.
I think one of the problems is, and again, we came across this in the last few years, that the cost of local authority vehicles, and the one that sort of sprung to mind was rubbish lorries, as it were, refuse lorries, I should say. The cost between a fully electric refuse lorry and a current fossil fuel lorry was just phenomenal. I mean, more than twice as much. And that had carried on for quite some time and still carries on. So economically, at the moment, still, I think, it's really very, very prohibitive. Obviously we do have a number of vehicles that are already electric, and the idea would be that they would charge up at the depot and buzz around all day long, but even small gritters and stuff like that, the fleet were looked at in terms of how we can develop that, and we're still talking at least twice as much as fossil fuel vehicles. So again, it's all part and parcel of this sort of overall development. So I think it is, we've got to be careful that we hit the right time, but equally, if we go too early, we'll have spent, as Councillor Bennett said, a load of money on something that may not be the right one or the right direction to go in. All right, Councillor Mathers.
Thank you, Chair. The recommendations from the committee, and I think it is Appendix between 1 and 2. It talks about us having this report. I'm very grateful for that. And having information about monitoring and usage, which I know isn't in this report. And I was just hoping that in future reports, or if there is data available, if it could be sent to the committee around the usage and monitoring. It would also be extremely useful in this report to get a sense of I know a number of them are short-term recommendations, medium-term and longer-term, including the electrification possibilities within our own fleet. It would be really useful to get a sense of monitoring of those KPIs in these reports, just to give us a sense of how the select committee's older select committee's recommendations are progressing forward, and it'd be useful to have that added. I mean, for me, the Climate Change Action Plan is fundamental to the existence of the planet, and we don't want to be sat back and watching the world go by, but pushing forward with technologies as appropriate. So it'd be really useful to get a sense of the council's own assessment of where they are in progressing these select committee recommendations. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely, Councillor. In terms of the usage report, because we only managed to complete some in May, and now we will be completing soon. So because it's too premature for me to provide that data, because we're still struggling with some of them were not live. So in the next meeting, definitely we will try to provide something in terms of usage.
All right, thank you. Councillor Garrick.
Thank you, Chair. So my question relates to the financial implications, because we know that private sector is not there they need to make a profit. So if, let's say, there are locations that you'd want to put on street charging point, but according to them it's not eligible or it's not cost effective, the usage is too low. So because the investment will be 50-50 with this private company. So for those locations that you might think that there is need to install charge and they don't agree, would the council be willing to put their fully owned by the council units just to help out residents?
In terms of on-street, we as a council, we want to have a high uptake as well, not only the supplier, because that's the benefit we want to give it to residents. So definitely it will be the council intention to provide them where the uptake is going to be high, so as the businesses or the supplier would think of. So where we think there is no usage, or because we, as I said, we do the model where they can be higher uptake, and we have the list of people who are asking for those EV units. So if there are any issues, then definitely we need to discuss that with the supplier. And it's not something council will put themselves, but this is the negotiation we'll have with our supplier. So we will, as a council, we will do them where the demand is high, rather than just somebody wants it there. We need to look at the demand model.
All right, Councillor Banerjee.
Thank you, Chair. A very, very quick question. It's actually quite relevant because someone at work asked me this question today. Have we considered maybe sort of a multi-tier pricing model for these car parks? And the reason I ask this is because if you charge your car at home between 11 p.m. and 5 a.m., the cost of electricity is a lot lower. So I know residents may be wary of leaving their car in a car park overnight, but to increase the usage, I mean, the unit's there, right? So would we consider maybe offering lower rates during off-peak times, or is it just one rate throughout the day, 24/7, 365 days a year? Thank you, Chair.
Current pricing model is same. There is no reduction for the night time, but we need to review that in future. But currently, it's too early days for us to see that the usage and uptake, and we can look at what time the people are using it. So that might help us as well. So we have to monitor as we go along, because we're too early in terms of uptake model.
Some of the county councils have already gone down that route, because and they've sort of upgraded the car parks, put lights in and other things, because they can use the car park for that very reason. They can use the car parks late at night, and people are happy, especially if it's within a certain walking distance, and if they don't have home or on-site or on domestic site charging themselves, and certainly a lot of areas where there are terraced housing, for example, then some of the county councils have, as it were, given their car parks over in the evening for charging. And that seems to have worked. The other thing, of course, as you've already mentioned in the report, is about economies of scale and getting together with other authorities and having that sort of bigger purchasing capacity. And I really do think that's the direction of that's where we should be going. And maybe talking through London councils and the LGA and so forth to see the extent to which there can be a lot more coming together of authorities.
Yeah, just to add one more thing to the Councillor Banerjee's about the electricity cost. What we need to think also is the domestic usage rate is different than commercial rate, what council purchases. So this is where we need to see whether the council gets a subsidy at night or not before we even decide whether we want to give that reduction, because our rate is different than anyone at home would charge.
Okay, well, the last one on this one, Councillor Garden.
sorry, so that was the point I was trying to make earlier about the charging at the moment. At peak time, going to anywhere, the most you'll be paying is something like 38 pence, 40 pence per kilowatt. So charging 60 to me means the uptake isn't going to be that good. And on top of that, because the wattage that you're getting, it would take you hours to charge your car to full capacity. So you need to, that's what I'm saying, I think you need to look at that. Maybe have you looked at partnering with someone with an infrastructure already in place to give you that competitive edge?
Because as I said previously, the phase one was just to replace existing. That's what the agreement we had previously. It was just a quick fix. Moving forward, that's what we will be looking at, where the demand is, and give them more faster. But we'll be stuck with the funding model as well from the OZAV, what type of funding we get and what type of EV units we can purchase, because they are the one who are guiding the local authorities, not only us, what type the local authorities should be providing and how we should be modelling. So we are looking at all that sort of, thing for consideration for the future long-term plan, not only in the middle. But if the councils want to decide we want to give ourselves funded, then we can decide where we want to put, what type we want to put. But currently we are trying to get the bid and fund it from the OZAF funding rather than council funding themselves. And as I said previously, because the council purchasing cost is not same as other suppliers, maybe, I don't know. When we did our model, 65p wasn't really high because we did the benchmarking with quite a few suppliers. So this is the reason we sort of gone 5p discount for resident first card holders, so they could get benefit out of it. But maybe in future we will provide the usage data as well. That gives a bit of a, where is a high as well as what time is high. So then we can go back and revert and see whether we can give the discount or is there any room for further in those areas.
Just one last practical issue, which will link in very nicely with our next item, about communications. And I did wonder whether or not, and it maybe it's there and I haven't seen it, whether or not we shouldn't put on the website and have a dedicated section of the website to tell people where charging units are. And then when new ones come along or are activated, then we can just add them to that. And whether or not it would be a good idea to have that available, some sort of map, I suppose, which shows where they are, and to make sure, and also to pick up on Councillor Garg's point earlier about vandalism and or if they're not working, to have a really quick information flow that says, well, okay, there's 4, 5, 6 in this particular car park, but only 2 are working because. And just to have a kind of update very frequently, so people do know. With petrol stations, everybody knows where they are. They come on your sat nav, and unless there's a petrol strike or something, by and large, you're going to be able to get petrol from a petrol station. Similar sort of thing. So throughout the borough, because we are going throughout the borough, then maybe some sort of map or at least other type of information as to where it all is, because you don't want people driving around trying to look for one and you can't find it.
That's correct, Chair. There is a jet map where people can see where all the EV units are. It covers entire London, where is the nearest one is. So as soon as the new EV units are installed, we update that. We give it to the people who update those jet maps. So soon, once we have that 46 done, we will update jet map, and that link is in our website as well. We have been doing compete with our communication team as well. Maybe we will, once that phase 1 is done, we will list those as well. So we will work with comms team as we go along.
All right. Well, look, I mean, you can tell from all the questions that there's a great deal of interest in this, and we'll definitely keep it under review and come back to it quite a lot, I should imagine. But as I say, that there are so many different strands to this, and there needs to be a lot more synergy and similarity going forward. As I say, a lot of different places are way behind us, and some are way ahead of us. It just depends on where they are and what they've chosen to do. But we do need a bit more uniformity throughout the country, I think, because we're still reading things about. There was a journalist a while ago who took a journey, I think, from Bristol all the way up to Scotland and was in absolute fear of running out all the time, and spent a great deal of time driving to various charging points and using up his charge rather than actually just getting on with the journey. So we'll definitely keep it under review. So Poonam, thank you very much indeed. Thank you. All right, we'll move on to agenda item 6, which is the internal external communications update. Emma, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for inviting me here to provide an update on the Council's external and internal communications. I won't go through the report produced verbatim, but provide a brief summary of the Council's communication channels and some of the key activities across the past year. So the vision for the Council's corporate communication services, producing the strategic narrative for the organisation, ensuring residents, businesses, workforce and partners are well informed about what the Council does, the services it provides and how to access them. Clear, accurate, meaningful, relevant and timely communications that is representative of the Council and its brand is imperative in building a positive reputation that the Council is putting residents first. The Council's core communication functions are media relations, campaigns and marketing, publications, social media, website content, internal communications and design. Corporate communications works collaboratively with services across the Council to deliver effective external and internal communications. Some of the key outcomes include informed and engaged stakeholders, a well-managed reputation and a strong brand identity, contributing to organisational outcomes, whether that's raising awareness, supporting the Council's transformation programme, generating income and supporting behaviour change. And then also developing and promoting opportunities for residents, community groups and other stakeholders to engage with the Council and support decision making. Our communications channels are regularly evaluated, so this includes sentiment and coverage for media relations, engagement, digital metrics for social media, our e-newsletters and website content, the outcome of marketing, whether that leads to service sign-ups, attendance, income generation or behaviour change, and qualitative feedback from residents and services. The report outlines our proactive and reactive strategies for media relations and their impact, from our approach to dealing with media inquiries and managing reactive issues to proactive methods such as issuing press releases that highlights the Council's good work. Our coverage is mostly neutral to positive and local, but last year we had national coverage for the Council's ULEZ expansion legal challenge, national and international, work at Heathrow Airport and seizing vapes, and several prosecutions. During the past 2 months, the Council's also had London-wide coverage for its new foster carer payment and benefits package, the Tashand annual bursary scheme, and the D-Day 80 commemorations, which saw BBC London present its evening news programme from the Battle of Britain Bunker. The report also covers the Council's approach to campaigns. Corporate communications liaises with services across the Council to plan and implement coordinated campaigns, to raise awareness, market events or services, manage transformational change and change or challenge behaviour. Some of these projects in 2023-24 included the Council's ULEZ expansion campaign, publicity of the voter ID in advance of the elections, attracting visitors to the Battle of Britain Bunker, the rollout of pay by phone across the borough, and foster carer recruitment. However, this year our approach to campaigns has changed to deliver more strategic communications through the development of a set of priority areas and priority campaigns. Each campaign has an OASIS communications plan with measurable objectives, bespoke content across a variety of targeted channels, and will be evaluated. It's already seeing success in terms of raising awareness of the Family Hub model, the marketing of the new fostering offer, which has yielded 73 expressions of interest since April, and the response to a recent survey of residents' recycling habits to inform a subsequent contamination campaign. This had in excess of 2,000 responses and closed on Sunday. Communications outside of the priority campaigns will be classed as business as usual. This is short-term or one-off, requiring minimal asset or content creation and placement on one or a few channels. The report also outlines how the Council creates various publications. This includes Hillingdon People, a culture and heritage brochure, and 5 e-newsletters. In recent years, there's been a focus on developing more digital marketing content, including targeted e-newsletters. These all have high engagement rates, higher than the average for the industry, and have proved effective as part of campaigns. We've recently launched a newsletter for council tenants. We've seen 5,100 residents subscribe to that channel, and we're now planning one for families. Social media is another key function of the service, and the report illustrates in detail the channels the council uses, their following, and some detail on the number of post, reach, reactions for 2023-24. The council produces free, organic, and also paid social media. Paid content on Facebook and Instagram has proven effective for various campaigns and initiatives, most recently foster care recruitment and the Tash Daniel Award. In April, the council's website team moved from working as part of corporate communications service, my department, to the new Digital and Intelligence Directorate. We continue to work closely with the website team to ensure consistency, accuracy and timeliness in terms of content production, that branding is correct, and website and intranet content aligns with campaign and project content. As well as producing campaign concepts and a range of collateral for printed and digital channels, corporate communications carries out business as usual design work too, which includes some signage for corporate property, livery for our vehicles, exhibitions and displays, forms, certificates, strategies, learning resources and toolkits. Corporate communications also creates a range of internal communications content to inform and foster engagement with staff. Channels include the weekly all staff and chief executive emails, a regular managers roundup email, intranet news items and blogs, and posters. All of the council's internal e-newsletters have high open rates, again higher than the average for internal comms, and high click rates. And the team also supports a range of annual engagement activities, including the council's Employee Recognition Awards, the Long Service Awards and Staff Survey. So in conclusion, to summarise, the council's communications plays a crucial role in producing the strategic narrative for the organisation and ensuring that stakeholders are well informed about the services and how residents can access them.
All right, thank you. I think one of the things that it's almost sort of a tautology, I suppose, in a sense, is really at the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the or 6 even, a bullet point on page 16 under the key outcomes, which is evidence of the impact of our communications with residents and for residents and the evaluation. So to what extent do we regularly keep a kind of rolling program of ensuring that what we're doing is actually delivering what's needed, and that knowledge and information is being transferred very easily as far as residents are concerned across all the issues that we want them to know about?
So we include evaluation across everything. We're always evaluating what we do and looking at new ways to communicate. So as I mentioned, every campaign plan has an OASIS plan, and as part of that, the final S in OASIS stands for scoring. So we do look at the evaluation in terms of whether that's digital metrics, in terms of the click rates, the open rates, the website visits, trackable URLs, social media engagement, the outcome of that marketing. Is it having an effect? Are there sign-ups? Is there increased attendance? Do we have more carers? Is there an increase in recycling? And in terms of media sentiment and coverage, and then qualitative feedback from residents. So asking residents what they think. In our new recycling survey, we did get a lot of good feedback that will help to shape further phases of that campaign as well. So we know what residents are maybe struggling to find, and we're using that to shape the campaign. So yeah, we're always looking at what we're doing and how we can improve on that, and looking at new methods of communications as well. So in terms of social media, we're looking in terms of the youth offer campaign at TikTok. We haven't done anything on TikTok yet, but it's obviously a channel that will appeal with young people, and also looking at a WhatsApp channel as well. Quite a few councils have created a WhatsApp channel, so we're looking at doing that as well. So yeah, we're constantly evaluating and looking at how we can improve those connections with residents.
Because of course one of the things is, especially with social media, is that in a sense it then can become self-perpetuating, can't it? Because we send out a message, and then people who get that message or link into that message in some way then sort of pass it on to others that are involved themselves. So there's trickle down isn't the right expression, but there's a kind of almost a fanning out of information that happens as a consequence of people finding out what's going on, then passing it on, as it were. All right, Councillor Garg.
Thank you for the report. It's very informal. Just going back to page 17, at the top of there's a table, and I just wondered if it would be useful to maybe do a comparison of those figures, and if they've sort of got better or worse, etc. I think that would give a good...
Sorry, which table are you referring to?
Just at the top of page 17.
I don't have the same report. I've printed off my...
the media relations.
Media relations.
You've got 23, 24.
Yes, we can
just wondered how they compared to previous years, and if that would show a pattern or anything.
It fluctuates in terms of media inquiries. It does fluctuate in what we get and what some of those topics are. So it does fluctuate, but we could put together some evaluation next time in terms of how that compares. Same with press releases. Sometimes we've got more news to share than other times. So yes, we can put together an evaluation next time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I have two questions. Firstly, thank you for a really good report. The one thing that I really like, and I think a lot of residents like, is the stories around where we've been successfully prosecuting somebody, whether they broke their licensing conditions or if they've been doing fly tipping. That, you know, if you're a hard-working citizen of the borough who pays your taxes and you don't like people who just try to get away with it, that we have a really good track record of getting those stories out. And I'd say over the last couple of years, the more and more of those you see, I think it gives a really good representation of the local authority in everything we do. I had two questions. So the first one was just on the social media. I'm not on Twitter. I think you probably everyone else is. Again, I feel too old by saying that. But 50,000 followers on Twitter, but only 15,000 on Facebook. And I was like thinking, if you could probably say 70 to 80% of the residents of the borough are on Facebook. 20% maybe on Twitter. And yet, actually, on Facebook, we are 8 out of 32 in London, so we're clearly doing very well. But is there a plan to... I was just looking up the population, so, you know, it's 5%, less than 5% of the borough follow us on Facebook. And that's if you assume that all 15,000 are residents of the borough, and they're not necessarily going to be. Is there a strategy to increase kind of Facebook adoption and following? If you answer that one, then I'll ask my second one after.
Okay, in terms of X, I can explain why we have such a high following. We were an early adopter. It was before I arrived at the council. We were an early adopter and did a real push. It was one of the first channels, I think, that we did. So there was naturally more subscribers. In terms of Facebook, I think that's where we see the most engagement. I think that might describe some of the demographic of the borough. But yes, we could do more to promote Facebook and encourage. We do encourage sign up across all of the channels. But yeah, we could do some more to promote Facebook and try and get some more residents to subscribe. A reason why we are looking at WhatsApp is that everyone texts, and it's proving a quicker way to get subscribers, and so a lot of councils and businesses are doing that WhatsApp channel now, and to grow and have more residents on board, really. So I'm interested to see how that progresses for us.
Cool. Thank you. Do you mind if I just on the second question, and I don't know if this sits with you, notice boards. So we've got 4 or 5 in my ward, and I'm sure the other diligent councillors around this table are similar in that we'll go and update them. But if you drive around the borough, probably 80% of them you see are just empty, and it just looks really poor. That I appreciate with the digital age, the kind of need for them has gone. But it's I guess to ask from your perspective if there are any sort of like central stock of posters that, rather than just having a blank notice board, we can put something up. So we should have, I don't know, a one-pager about the library offering, a one-pager about the leisure facilities offering, one-pager about the Battle of Britain bunker, that rather than just having all of this empty space, you could just put something up so that it looked fuller. I just think that notice boards, you see them so often, and that gives quite a negative sort of reflection on councillors and also the local authority that we're just not doing anything. When we are, it's just that we've kind of evolved our strategy, but we've still got these. It feels like we should have, I don't know, a central stock of things we could just grab and put up ourselves.
So in terms of that, it doesn't sit with my service in terms of the maintenance of notice boards, but I will take that on board. I think that's a really good idea, and so we'll look into it in terms of we do have some stock posters, and we can produce some extra ones. We do take into account those notice boards for campaigns, and some services don't always feel the need to use some of those notice boards. But yeah, I think that's something we can take away and look into.
Thank you. And even if it's just a case of giving some democratic services to any councillors who want to grab something to put in their notice board can do. Yeah. Thank you, Chair.
All right. Yeah, just on that point, I mean, the ones that are used, that seem to be used most, and it's quite interesting because at any stage when there's been any sort of thought of removing public notice boards, there's very often quite a considerable kickback by residents because they quite like them. The ones that are used a lot tend to be used by local groups, and there'll be, I don't know, upcoming events and or you know, kind of a permanent one just saying, well, if you want to join this is our number and so forth. So there'll be like an information poster either about a kind of rolling situation in terms of if you want to join, that type of thing, or similarly, I don't know, any sort of activity will go on there. But it's a good idea, and people do like them, and they do like to use them, and I think that there are a lot of other relatively semi-rural areas that do use them because still people do look at them to see what's going on, much more very, very locally, I think. So they're still quite a good resource. But you're right, if they're empty, it just doesn't look like something's going on. Councillor Banerjee, then Councillor Mathers.
Thank you, Chairman, and just to echo again my fellow councillors on a quite detailed and interesting report. And just bear with me on this question. There are 2 parts to it. When I read corporate communications, I think central communications, and where my question is going with this is how integrated are you with something like the libraries, like Twitter, Facebook, their communication channels? Because again, just drawing on my experience in some other committees, there was a discussion in terms of, I think, I can't remember how recent this was, we can borrow blood pressure machines from libraries. I'm not sure how many presidents actually know that. And they were like, well, libraries will get the message out. Oh, no, Central would do this. And I was like, I don't really mind. I'd rather it goes out twice than it doesn't go out at all. And that's my question in terms of how linked it is. And then, depending on that reply, I'll follow up with the question.
In terms of the other social media channels that aren't the corporate ones, they are owned by the services. And the libraries one is a good example in the sense that they do keep us updated with what they're doing, and likewise we reshare, so we amplify each other's. In terms of the blood monitoring, the blood pressure monitoring equipment. That was publicised by both of us, so we'd included it on social media, we've done posters, we'd included it in Hillingdon People, and it's all quite good success in Botwell, at Botwell Green Library, which we've reported on since. But the libraries have promoted and we've promoted, so yeah, there has been a linked effort there.
And I don't want to just pick on libraries because, you know, there's like obviously, you know, other facilities like green spaces. Do they have their own, and I don't want to sort of, you know, make this more complicated than it needs to be, but have we considered having Twitter accounts for certain green spaces? And the reason why I keep coming back to libraries is because I've had cases quite recently, they had to close suddenly because of lack of staff. So if anybody was subscribed to their Twitter feed, they may have got that message, you know, just by social media, then turning up to the library and saying, oh, it was closed because staff, you know, couldn't be able to turn up. So is it fragmented to that level of detail, or is it just kept at a high level? Thank you.
So we do have a social media justification for a request form as well for services to request for an account, and that goes through as it's processed through us. It's for us to make a decision whether or not they're resourced effectively enough to manage those accounts. We have in the past seen various teams set up Facebook accounts and members of staff leave and those accounts are sat dormant. So we've got quite a strict process in place for them to prove that they can take on that resource, that they can look at sort of the social media policy that we've got in terms of what they should and shouldn't post, take on that responsibility. We also don't want to dilute our corporate channels, so we want to cover information across both. So it's sort of taking a look at that really, and we do have higher numbers of followers. It takes time if you set up a new account to build up those followers. So for most part, we do say to services, use our accounts first, and if there's a strong enough basis or a case, then they create their own. Libraries is a good example of where they've built it up over the years and managed that account very well, but some other services haven't really got to grips with it. So then we do take those accounts back again and pull it back into corporate. Yeah.
All right, thank you. Councillor Mathers.
Thank you, Chair. No, just reflecting on Adam's comment, look, the NHS, when you walk into a surgery waiting room, are covered from wall to wall with posters and things. I'm sure in partnership they would love to work more, and that's part of my question really. So the working in partnership is obviously key. We have common ground with the NHS and other statutory bodies, but also with local businesses and local voluntary groups and other organisations, third sector. So I wondered how much you work with different departments to ensure that they're communicating with their partnerships and that people aren't duplicating effort, but equally making sure that, I mean, the council is going through significant transformation at the moment, and I understand there's a strategy around building reputational credit, but it would also be useful to work with residents' feedback and partners' feedback around how to decrease frustration. So an example was mentioned around kind of shutting of library hours due to staffing is one thing, but when we know we've got a digital transformation process and things are changing, if you ring, I think it's Universal Credit, they provide you a message saying that we're updating our phone service, it's going to an AI solution, I assume. So this may sound different or seem different, and that messaging goes out with their phone contact. I mean, there's also an opportunity with our call centre to have messaging around, you know, yes, there is the messaging constantly, which gets frustrating around, you could do this online. There's a limit to the people's frustration with that, but also messaging around, are you aware that you can sign up to our e-com letters around culture and heritage, and just using more of those channels that we already have, and pre-warning and supporting residents and partners in order to make sure that any change that's coming up is well communicated, and any opportunity there is across the multiple different ways that people access the council to I can't think what the word is. I want to say cross-pollinate, but that may not be the right phrase for marketing. But yeah, just using those opportunities, and how often you do those kind of scoping exercises.
So in terms of partnership work, we do have good partnership models with the NHS. I think that grew during the pandemic when they relied a lot on us in terms of putting out communication in terms of COVID. So yeah, we do have good connections there, and they regularly have a column in Hillingdon people. The same with the police. So again, we've got good relations with the police in terms of their column for Hillingdon people as well, but also some of their recent engagement events in terms of the Met for London. We've just looked at their recruitment campaign and we've reshared that. So we're both working together to amplify. Also in terms of some of the activity with fraudulent CEOs in terms of parking, we shared our messaging with them and then they've amplified it across all of their channels. So we are working together in terms of sharing our messaging. I do take your point in terms of some of the transformational change. AWS, when we launched that, we've looked at the scripts there, but maybe sometimes we are missing an opportunity to keep saying and reminding residents that we have e-newsletters and other channels. We are looking at a campaign later this year in terms of billing, trying to get council tax billing, trying to get residents to do that online. So we will be pushing the benefits of that. So with some of the transformation activity, we'll be pushing what the benefit is of having that online account, so you can see all of your bills together in that one place, and the sort of the environmental impact as well, really, that saves on the trees. So yes, we have good partnership relations, and then in terms of transformation, we could do a little bit more of that. I agree.
All right, Councillor Jebediah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Emma, for the report and your presentation. I'm looking at the website content area, and I do note that you say you're no longer responsible for the website. However, when it was under your auspices, it took you something like 5 years to create a new website, the report said. And what was your challenges? Why did it take so long?
It was the pandemic. It was that came, and then we had to create a whole new section on COVID-19. So that was quite a big section, and actually it was sort of really high engagement at the beginning of the pandemic. So there was a lot of time spent on continually updating as the guidance changed. So that was a key focus then. There were thousands of pages on the previous council website. I think it was about 7,000 that we stripped back substantially. So it did take time to go through that content, section by section, working with services to agree what that content should look like moving forward. So yes, it did take a little bit of time. It's an ongoing process. Websites are always going to be changing, but from that content and that written perspective, that's what our focus was. And now that they've moved to the new digital team, they'll be looking at how they use technology and better deliver some of the things that you were asking for before in terms of maps, directories, improving that user experience. And we also launched the new My Account. Again, my team had played a small role in that, but also there was other teams involved in that as well. So there was various impacts really in terms of delivering the new website, and then we also delivered a new intranet as well at the same time. So just as we were concluding the main website, we delivered a new intranet in 6 weeks, which was quite a task.
Thank you for your response.
Thank you very much. Just picking up on something that Councillor Mather said, in a former existence, I chaired a committee which looked into what was then called GP pressures, and one of the things with GP practices was that they pointed out that an awful lot of their time was taken up with patients who weren't necessarily unwell, but had become anxious or worried as a consequence of a range of different issues. Not really to do with health at all, but to do with other things. And some of those things touched on what the council does. And so one of the things that we suggested then, and went down terribly, terribly well, was that the Citizens Advice Bureau, who have the most extraordinary sort of reach in terms of knowledge of different organisations and charities, and because they can't always sort of deal with the thing themselves, but they very often can signpost people very, very quickly into a... We were astonished about the range of different areas and very specific areas. And a lot of GP practices have these big screens with all sorts of information that pops up on them. And again, we did say then that it would be a jolly good idea for the council to get really embedded, because the synergy, again, between libraries, GP practices, and I know there's all sorts of stuff around data protection, but once you've got around that, especially when people actually want to know stuff and we're telling them, it just seems to be this strand between places where people gather, and if you're sat there waiting to see your doctor, and you've got quite a bit of time to wait, and you can watch stuff on the screen that tells you about things, especially if it tells you about things, as the doctor said to us, if we can put up on the screen stuff that will help them not need to talk to us, but nevertheless they can come to the surgery to see it, and we even got to a point at one stage where we had citizens advice, I don't know what to call them, people, helpers, officers, whatever, advice, in the GP surgeries. So that if the GP essentially discovered that the person was anxious but not ill, but actually what they needed was help with housing or education or whatever it was, they could say, well, we've done our bit now, but actually there's somebody out there who could talk to you. And so to have a much more integrated communication set up, similarly with libraries as well. And you know, there's so much going on, and there's so much information that we do need to get out there. But there's different ways of doing it, I think, and different channels. So maybe a discussion with the GP practices organisations to make sure that we are, if we can, having access to their information systems so that people are getting the maximum, and also include the citizen advice people. And maybe even dental practices, and so places where people go to and need information, because it's often not one thing that they're seeking help about, and having that additional sort of splurge of information and help, it seems would be quite useful and something to look into. I don't know what you think about that sort of approach.
We have looked at GP surgery, so in the past we did used to send posters and leaflets, but over the years they obviously don't necessarily want lots of posters and leaflets cluttering. So yes, we did look during the pandemic in terms of using their channels, particularly text messaging, to get out key messages. It's probably worth us looking to see which ones have screens and whether they'd be willing to share some time on there. In terms of libraries, we do quite a lot of posters for libraries, and it's something I've recently discussed with the library service, is maybe some investment in some digital boards at libraries, also here at the Civic Centre as part of the refurb as well. So we're not producing and using resource in terms of design. It would be a bit more of an efficient use of our time, but also a much more visually engaging medium for residents. So there's something in that. We also do produce exhibitions for the libraries as well, and we're looking at producing something that's more long-term for the libraries rather than lots of them to have bigger impact. As part of that as well, we're looking at digital methods instead of producing printed boards. So we are looking a lot at how we can reduce our printed options and looking at digital, and libraries is on the agenda there.
But is there opportunity to link in to the digital setup that GPs have?
That's not something I've looked at, so I'll take that away and have a look into it.
You know, because we could have a kind of info, I don't know, explanation about things, even if it was somebody, or, I don't know, an officer or whoever, on a rolling loop kind of thing, explaining what's available, even if it's talking about events or whatever. I just can't help but think there's a big resource there, and sometimes in some GP practices, it's the same thing going round and round because there isn't a volume of material, and yet it could be. And if we also facilitated the use of, as I say, citizen advice or other people, and you don't necessarily need physical places for the citizen advice people to be in for others to visit, because if it can be dealt with in that way, with information numbers and email addresses and all the rest of it, it's just a much wider catchment that we're aiming at and able to get to. All right.
We also are, in terms of one of our new campaigns looking at preventing homelessness, part of that campaign, we're looking at how we can get some myth busting, but also signposting to organisations such as Citizens Advice. So we'll be using social media to do some of that. So that we are looking at how we can signpost to other agencies in a better way. Yeah.
Okay, Councillor Garg.
Sorry, so I've got two questions again. The first one, I know you haven't got the same, so you've got a table with the social media, and it's interesting that everything has increased in following, etc., but I wondered if you knew why there was such a huge decrease in next door. That was the first question. And the second question was, linking into what the chair was saying about linking other organisations, do we use cookies? So I've noticed, like, if I'm searching on my laptop or something for, I don't know, yogurt, then all of a sudden I get a link or some advert or something pop up for yogurt. So in a similar way, can we do something with the council social media?
Yes. So in terms of first describing about Nextdoor changed their algorithm this year, and so it did see a decrease. The way it changed its algorithm, it made the site a little bit more clunky, and a lot of people then decided not to necessarily use it as much. So that's what happened. But it's still got quite a wide reach in terms of the borough. In terms of paid social media, yes, we do run paid social media campaigns, and they have been quite effective. So they do pop up on Facebook and Instagram, and we're also looking in terms of the fostering campaign, in terms of looking at digital profiling and automated marketing. Again, we're working with the fostering team and the digital director. It's not something we've done before, but that's something that we're looking at to sort of attract certain demographics, certain people, and achieve better outcomes through it, and sort of that push messaging as well. If someone looks at it and then looks at it again later, then you keep them sort of engaged through that push messaging. So yeah, that's something we're looking at.
All right, unless there's any other questions, really helpful, very good update. That there's always more to do, but it's obviously in very safe hands, so I've no doubt we'll see you very soon. Then we'll be going to some other things. Thanks very much. Thank you. Thank you. All right, everybody. So next one is item 7, which is the forward plan, which to a large extent I think we're just going to note. But unless Manisha's got anything to add to it or to...
Thanks, Chair. Just to say, following the last committee, the request for the digital strategy to come to this committee, it will do in September.
Okay, good. Our next meeting is in August or not? No. September. Ah, right, okay. So we get August off. Hurrah. All right, so that's the forward plan. Everyone will have seen it. Right, work programme, item 8.
Thanks, Chair. So members are asked to consider the work programme and provide any feedback.
Okay.
Just to update members, so following the last meeting, in terms of the request for an update on the fleet, this item has now been added to the programme for our November meeting, and officers will be able to provide an update then.
Okay, because one thing that we were very interested in was this business about, I mean, it wasn't £1 million, but it was not far off, pounds worth of what was the expression, avoidable costs in regard to damage to fleet vehicles, which seemed to have some sort of correlation to the type of drivers that we were having or had or whatever. And we were very keen to have a look at that. So, but I think that's been slightly pushed back because we wanted to get the transformation information coming to us in September. So that's something that we're very keen on. I said this at the first meeting of the new committee, but in order to be able to deal with the volume of service areas that we've got, all 18 of them, I'm not saying we're going to be able to do that, but to have the most important aspects of the ones that we consider to be the most important, And traditionally what I've done is to talk to Cabinet members to see if there are specific areas of concern that they want us to look into. For committee members to pitch in with ideas of things that they want to look at. And also, which I'm doing at the moment, speaking to very senior officers to see if there's any areas of interest that they would like us to look into. So 3 good sources of information to put together. So at any stage for the next meeting, if members want to pitch for different types of reviews that we want to do, our procurement review went down very, very well and was a highly professional, with a good lot of recommendations which are being implemented and are making a difference, which is great. And some of that was seen in some of the cabinet papers for this week as well. Things like contract frameworks and so forth. So, you know, we're well known for doing good in-depth reviews and coming up with good ideas. One of the other things that I want to do, and we were talking about this before, is to have one meeting, and it may be an additional meeting, where we invite the 3 cabinet members, corporate services, finance and property, highways and transport, to come along on the same evening. I don't suggest all together, but maybe, you know, half-hour, 40-minute slot each, so that they can come and talk to us about what their role is and what their department's doing, and just to have a discussion around that. And I'm thinking maybe that'll be quite a nice Christmas present for us, so we'll do it in December. Whether it's such a nice present for them, I don't know, but we never know. But I think it's important, and we used to do it on health, so we'd have the cabinet member for health come along, and I know other select committees have their linked cabinet members, so there's no reason why we shouldn't. I think it's better to do it in one hit rather than spread it all out, so we can do that. So we're working on that, so I think that's a good idea. And the format of it will work out in advance and deal with it, but I think that'll be a good thing. So some big headline topics for us to delve into. You can see from the relevant service areas that we deal with that there's a lot of stuff there to look at. I think that electric vehicle charging is something that we need to keep a really close eye on, notwithstanding all the issues that we talked about before. Highways is an interesting one. There's lots of different areas, so please email me or Anisha and then me at the same time, and we'll look at those two. We can do single meeting reviews, we can do long-term reviews, we can do whatever we like. So we'll pick up on those because we've been given a really big portfolio, and I want us to hit as many of those topics as we can. Good. All right. So, where are we now? Oh, we've got to the end. Unless there's any other... Oh, Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Chair. It was just a question on the multi-year work programme. My hopes were raised when I saw update on the new members portal and members inquiry process for July 23rd. And I just wondered if is that something that we're going to get at a later date, or is it completely off the agenda? Because we didn't have it today. Or is my eyesight slightly fading and that's coming up in November?
Looks like it's
that's what happens when you've been at work all day and then you come here afterwards.
Well,
but that is quite exciting. Actually.
Yeah, absolutely.
Less so for residents, but
no, it's terribly exciting for us. It's frightfully exciting for us. And again, that's something that we need to really chase down on, because the whole issue about councillors being able to do their work properly and get results, and how we do that, and there is a better way probably and a more effective way, but we do need to chase down on that, and we want to get the right answers on that. So it maybe we'll look at rejigging things, but that's certainly something that we very much have in mind. Any other issues that anybody wants to raise? Nope. Okay. Then we can decouple or something.
Thank you.
Uncouple. What was that phrase that that chap from that popular beat combo talked about when they